welcome to the Inviting Shift podcast. I'm so excited that you're here. This is the Midlife Woman's podcast for a confident and joyful journey. I'm your host, Christina Smith, and twice a week I'll be bringing you topics that impact midlife women the most. I hear it from my clients. They have health concerns around perimenopause and menopause. We have mental and emotional challenges going on that I want to help you manage and work through. I want to talk about how we deepen our relationships and our friendships in midlife, and then what we do when we want more, how we get clear on that, and how we start moving forward confidently and joyfully, because that's what this journey is about. I want midlife women to come together, create a community to revolutionize how we see midlife. Tune in for this week's topic. Well, welcome back, shifters. This week, our guest is Mary Remmes, and she is going to talk to us about managing the care for our aging parents. And I know that this is happening for a lot of us in midlife. I think they call us like the sandwich kind of generation, where we're still raising kids and we might be caring for older parents as well. And so I don't know much about this subject, so I thought I should reach out to someone who really knows something about that, and that is Mary. Mary works with people to help them manage those relationships and manage how to move forward in a good way with our aging parents. So welcome to the show, Mary. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Christina. I'm thrilled to be here. I love talking about all things old people.
Well, fantastic. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to doing what you're doing, and then we'll go right into it.
Sure. I actually started out my career as a nursing home administrator, and that was kind of by accident, but it turns out that's exactly what I was supposed to be doing. So I worked as a nursing home administrator and then started having children. So I was home raising my children for about 18 years. And when I decided to go back to work, I knew what I wanted to do, and it involved working with the senior population, but not in the delivery of long-term care as an administrator, because that had become really more regulatory and HR issues, which is not what I wanted to do. So I got involved in providing companion care to seniors in their homes, and then experienced the benefit of a life coach myself with another family matter. And it was like an aha moment. It's like, I can help so many people, so many more people as a coach for adult children as they navigate everything that comes with an aging parent. So I'm able to pair what I know about the delivery of long-term care as an administrator and understanding the complexities of healthcare with my skill as a life coach to help people navigate this really ever-shifting period in their life.
Beautiful. What a unique set of gifts to put together and really serve people. Because although I haven't experienced it yet, I know a lot of my clients do go through this. Like, how do we manage this care? How do we convince mom that she can't drive anymore? How do we, get them to give us answers when they don't want to tell us what's going on with their health? There's so many questions. And so what are some of the biggest questions or the biggest struggles that you help adult children with?
Well, you touched on a few of them, and yeah, I think you're so spot on, and your listeners are so spot on, because we don't think about this until we find ourselves right in the middle of it, and it's usually because of a crisis. And I find that when we're trying to be in a relationship with our parents in the midst of a crisis, when we're trying to make decisions in crisis mode, there's just so many opportunities for things to go wrong. But to your question about, what are the most common things that people face? I think it's important to realize, no matter what we're facing, is that our aging parents' goals for their life are probably vastly different than our goals for their life. In that, right? They want to be independent. They want their autonomy, and they want to, and they will do that, even if it means they're in very risky situations when they may not live as long. That's their priority, is to be independent and live life the way they want to. The adult child, naturally, our goal for them is to stay safe, and to keep them alive as long as we possibly can. So you can see there's this natural conflict that's built in as our aging
Mm.
parents get old and we become more involved in the care and keeping of our aging parents. So I think sometimes just realizing that natural conflict is there is helpful. Um,
Right, right. And knowing that they're like their own people, right? I mean, that's the big thing. Like, it seems like we're parenting our parents, but we can't
mhm.
really parent our parents, can we? Because they are, sovereign individuals on their own. So for us to
Yes,
tell them how to live is hard.
it's very hard. And you're absolutely right, Christina. When we have the thought, I need to parent my parent, that already puts us out of alignment with who we are in the relationship and who they are in
Mm,
the relationship. So that sets us up for a very, very rocky road. I think that
mm,
in a perfect world, in an ideal world, if we can have conversations with our parents, small conversations along the way, and conversations that have twice as many questions as they do directives. For instance,
so a lot of listening.
a lot of listening, and that's not natural for us, but it becomes
Mm,
so important and so valuable for us when we are dealing with aging parents. And a lot of small conversations along the way is more productive, but it's not how we're naturally inclined to do it. Typically, what we do, and ask me how I know this, I did it myself, right? Is we bite our tongue, we sit back and we watch, and we start compiling all this evidence for why we think mom should fill in the blank. And then
mm,
something happens, and we're like, okay, I'm going in. We're having the conversation, right? It's the come to Jesus
mm.
meeting. We have this big
At the end
conversation.
of this meeting, you're going to have everything resolved, right?
Yes.
And
And
that's
that
not exactly
never
how hard
happens.
conversations work.
Right. It never happens. And what happens is that we go in on the offensive, and they become
Mm,
defensive, and it usually blows up. So
mm,
having small conversations, asking asking questions, like for instance, let's say your mother is a widow and she's still living in the home that you all grew up in, and there's a lot of care there's a lot of upkeep that is involved with that. Instead of saying, mom, it's probably time we have the conversation about selling the house. That's going to put her on
that's
a
a big
defensive mode, right? Makes
mm,
sense from our
mhm,
perspective. This is what needs to happen. But imagine if you went in and said, mom, tell me, what do you love living about this? What do you love living in this house by yourself?
mm,
And what's hard about it, right? Tell me both sides, and then just listen to what she says. I mean, that's just one
mm,
example of
mhm,
how to ask questions that give you information that's going to be helpful in knowing what direction do we go. What's mom,
So it's
what
almost
is
like,
important?
yeah, it's almost like becoming a life coach for mom. Like, instead of like saying you have to go do this thing, it's like, well, let's figure out what it is that you're actually craving and what you're actually loving about being in this house. And that'll help us if we do want to move you into a place that you're going to get some of the same things that you're loving. And
Mhm,
being able to think really deeply about that rather than, oh, this is just a nice place and there's some people here and you might like
right,
them, right? And what I
right.
really loved that you said earlier was waiting, not waiting until we're in panic mode and fix it mode, and now something really has to change, right? Because then we're going in with that energy of like almost force, like this
Mm-hmm.
has to change now because I'm panicked that you're unsafe, you're taking
Yes.
risks, or you're not going to be able to do this by yourself. And when we're in that mode, I call it halts, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sick, but that's a different type of discomfort. And whenever we're uncomfortable, whew, that is not the best time to have these longer conversations. So starting early is what I'm hearing from you first is like start before you think you might need to so
Yes.
that you can start figuring these things out ahead of time so there isn't a panic. And then the next step, I'm just summarizing what we've already said because I want to make sure everybody's clear on this because it's a big topic. Asking lots of questions and listening a lot. Yeah.
Mhm.
Fantastic. And we can do the same thing, I'm guessing, if dad's driving and he starts getting tickets or whatever, and we start getting unsafe, like, can he still drive? So instead, we might be able to ask questions like what?
Like that, I would say, and the driving conversation, hands down, the most volatile conversation and the one that we do the worst at as adult children. Because what we
Mm.
do is we go in and we take the keys, right? Or we send somebody in,
Ah,
somebody's going to take the fall on this one and I'm going to be the bad guy. And it's just it's such a difficult time in life. And if I think that if we can, first of all, prepare ourselves mentally and just thinking about it from their perspective. And I like to remind
mm.
people, remember what it was like when you were 16 and you got your driver's license? Your whole
It's the
world
opposite,
opened up,
right?
right? It was exhilarating. I mean, it was just such an expansive feeling. And now the opposite
Mm.
of that is going to be happening because when somebody no longer drives, their world becomes very small. And so
Mhm.
just to have some compassion for how difficult this is for your aging parent and how difficult it is for you to be in this role, to be the one to have to guide them to giving up driving. But I think, I mean, you asked what would that look like with that conversation? I think if you have the ability to do it early on, it's like, Dad, there might come a day when driving gets to be too much for you. What are the indicators that you want me to bring to your attention if I ever notice them?
Mm.
Right? So
Mm.
engage
So
him
instead of
in
using our
the
own indicators, sorry, I was
yeah.
just saying, instead
Because
of using our own indicators, like I think,
yes,
instead I can be like, what is your checkbox? What looks unsafe to you?
and just listen, right? Because we're going to
Mm.
want to interject. But if we can ask that question and just listen and see what they say. And sometimes they'll shut down. They don't want to have that conversation, right? It's very frightening for them to have that conversation, the fear of losing that
Mhm.
independence. And that's why I say several small conversations, so it doesn't go, so maybe they shut down the first time. Come back around to the conversation in 2 weeks or next month.
Mhm.
Um, I
Mhm.
would never recommend having that conversation while you're in the car with them. Right? It's have a conversation when you're not, when driving isn't even on the table. Just a conversation that
Mhm.
you're just a natural conversation that you're having, human to human,
Mm.
respecting that
Mm.
one day we're going to be them. And how do I want my kid
Mhm.
talking to me? What do I want my child to come to me with? I think
Mm.
a lot of this is going to make sense to us when we become them.
Yeah, too bad it'll be too old to help them through it. I mean, but when I
Yeah.
think about it, because I did work in some retirement homes and
Mhm.
I've caretaked people who are older. And that was like the biggest thing for them was like moving in meant leaving their cars because the place
Mhm.
that I was at did not have their cars. And the kids could be convincing them that, look, but you have everything you need here, you can order anything here, and but it still was hard because it's like
Mhm.
giving up control of your own life. And
Mhm.
so I really love this way of like, you're even bonding a better relationship with them, right? Like, this is about really understanding your parents, where maybe a lot of us didn't spend a lot of time really understanding what our parents liked about their life, what they don't like about their life, what they find too hard now. And
Mhm.
instead of like, I know when my husband talks to his parents, it's just about their health problems, like, oh, this is the problem, this is what the doctor said, and blah blah, instead of like, but what does that mean for the quality of living that you have, right? How can I help you increase the quality of your life while you're still here? And I think that this one big one that we were talking about earlier is the thing that hits me is like, when you when we want them to be around, oh, we want them to be around until our kids are getting married and go to the wedding and everything. But that may not be their goal, right? That may not be their goal. Their goal might be, I want to live as wild as I can for the next 5 years rather than, trying just to be healthy for the next 25. And I think that that's a real hard conversation, rather than, well, my opinion's right because you live longer.
It's so interesting. I'm glad that you brought that up because it's so important to think about what am I making their decisions mean about me? You said that
The
you brought
stories
up
we're
the
telling ourselves about it.
yes,
Mm,
yes, because it's
mm,
not that they don't want to be around for their grandchildren's wedding.
sure.
It's that how they live their life is so important to them. And
Mm,
being around for the grandparent or the grandchild's wedding might not be at the top of their list. It doesn't mean that they don't want to
hmm
be there. It means that they want to structure their life in a way they want to live their life, right? And one of
mm,
the things that I think it's so important because we all have a story about who and how our parents are.
mm,
And
mhm,
everything that they do and say, our brain wants to use evidence to prove our story is correct. So if I
mhm,
think, oh, my dad is just always so obstinate, and I attempt to have a conversation with him about driving, and he disagrees or he shuts down, I say, oh, well, there you go. My dad's just obstinate, right? As opposed to,
mhm,
this is a hard conversation. This is a hard time in his life because he feels like his world is getting smaller.
mm.
Maybe it's not obstinance.
And he's
Maybe it's
giving
just
up.
him processing what he's giving up. Yeah.
Hmm Yeah,
So to build
yeah.
on that
There's a lot that
relationship,
we give up.
yeah, there is a lot that we give up. And to be able to build on that relationship with them, because I think we always, I'm going to assume that most of us want to create connection with our elderly parents.
Hmm
And we inadvertently so many times put up walls because we're over here thinking I've got I've got to parent my parent, right? I've got to make decisions for them to keep them safe. And they're over there thinking they're trying to take control of my life. So there's
The
no
opposite
connection
from
there.
when we were children, right? I mean, that's exactly the conversation we had with them, only backwards. Like, I'm trying to live my life as a teenager, and you're trying to keep me down and make all these
Mm-hmm.
decisions for me. And that's not fair. I'm an adult, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now we're having those same types of conversations. And I really love this part about like understanding that it's a story that we're telling ourselves
Mm-hmm.
about how they're showing up. And of course the ego always makes it about us, right? Like, oh, they don't
Yes.
care about me if they don't eat well every day and exercise and do all the things that I think they should be doing, they must not care about me. And I think that there is this big part that we have to remember of like freedom of choice, them being able to decide, hey, if I want to eat cheeseburgers every day and that's the quality of life that I want to have, then that's the quality of life I should be able to have, right? Maybe there's a negotiation in there, right, for health issues. But if that's really what they want, then that's their choice. And I think that we forget that as they're start to become unable to do some things, we start thinking like, oh, well, then somebody has to take over their life so that they can do these things as long as possible. But their choice might be, I'd rather not live forever and have a boring life of, salads and
Exactly.
vegetables, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so
Adults,
there has to be a
yeah,
big respect there.
there does. I think that it's advantageous if we can get ourselves to that point of being
Mm,
respectful of what they want, even when we disagree with it. Or I would even say, especially when we disagree with it. Because
mm,
adults get to make bad choices every day. And we watch people make
yeah.
bad choices every day. And I think it's helpful in this time also to believe, like to remember in this space that everybody's really doing their best. And sometimes
Mm,
their best isn't
mm,
very good. And that goes for us too, right?
hmm
We always do our
Everybody.
best.
Yeah.
And sometimes our best isn't very good, but it's still our best in that moment.
Mm,
And allowing that to be enough is really important, especially as we partner in the care for aging parents, because
mm,
we can go down the path of, I should be doing more, this person's doing less. I should, my life doesn't look like theirs. There's just so many so much drama that we can create for ourselves. And if we can have the
Mm,
compassion for ourselves and knowing that I'm doing my best, and
mm.
usually that's pretty good. Sometimes it's not very good, and I love all of me through it. This is a completely different
Yeah.
path that we what we had talked about, but I think that it
No, but
plays
I
into
love this because right now I have a client who she lives with her fiance's mother. They both do because they were caretaking her, but they want to move away from that house. And she's like trying to tell all of the siblings, hey, look, there's things going on. We need to be aware, blah, blah, blah. And they're all like, we're going to deal with it when it comes, like
Mhm.
and so like my advice to her was like, well, what are the things that you can actually do, right? What is that you can actually control? Because you can't control this woman, you can't control the siblings. What is it that you can control? And when she realized, like, oh, hold on. Like, that is my best. Me trying to talk to to their siblings is the best. Like, that's all I'm really responsible for. And I think that, we can tell ourselves a story because of that discomfort of like thinking of them hurting themselves or even passing, that we want to control everything. And if they would just, the whole world, if the world would just behave the way that I wanted it to, we would
Because we
be so
know,
much
right?
safer.
We know what everybody should do. We do.
Yeah,
We forget that
we each
sometimes
do.
we
Yeah.
have a hard time keeping our own lives on track, but we know what everybody else should be doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So then
yeah.
we can definitely tell ourselves stories about ourselves, like, I'm not doing enough, I'm not. But we have to also remember that we have to release control of that, is what I'm
Mhm.
hearing, is that release some of that control because you aren't their parent. You can't ground them and put them in their room, right? You can't take away their
Right.
phone and call it
Yeah.
a day. And so I love this about having all these teeny tiny small conversations, like keeping it as like this ongoing thing. It's so important because even when people say, I'm going to go have this hard conversation, and I'm like, I hope you don't think you're going to have the end all be all answer at the end of it, because
Right.
most hard conversations do not go that way. There's a lot of
Right.
like, okay, I heard you, you heard me. Now we have to go away and process a little bit and really think about what
Mhm.
the best way is. Maybe we can have another conversation in 2 weeks. And that takes the pressure off, right? Of us having to get offensive, them getting defensive. We're just talking. That's all we're doing, is asking questions and talking, which
Yeah.
is so important and lets us just let go of that control.
It does. It does. Yeah, it's I'm glad that you talked about, having that hard conversation. We kind of touched on that earlier, that we go in, we all have an agenda, and
Mm,
being able to set our agenda aside to listen to what the other person is really thinking and feeling. Most of us are coming with aging parents, most of us are coming into this motivated by fear.
hmm.
Fear of what's going to happen if, or fear that they're going to fall, or fear that, something bad is going to happen.
Anything. Yeah.
And we tend to make our decisions then based on fear, which I have never made a good decision that was fueled by
No.
fear.
No. Especially that panicked fear, right? Where
Right?
you're in that state.
Yes. So, that awareness that you're talking about, that self-awareness of, realizing, stepping back and saying, all right, let's slow this down. It's so That's one of the things that's kind of ironic. We feel like it's all an emergency because they're old. They don't have much
Mm,
time left, right? Or their time is limited, which puts a tremendous amount of pressure on us, thinking that we have
mm,
to make the right decision, or it limits our ability to what we really need to do is slow everything down
mm,
and take a step back and say, okay, what's really happening here? What are the facts
mm,
of the situation? And then sort out those facts from the story that we're telling ourselves about mom or dad.
which is the
And
worst
that's
case
hard to do.
scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. Our brains immediately go to the worst case scenario.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Somebody's going to knock on their door and take advantage of them. Somebody's going to, yeah, like, or they, like you said, they're going to fall, they're going to get in an accident. We think it's going to happen right now. And
Mm-hmm.
that panic state makes us say it has to happen right now. And I've said this to my clients so much: whenever you're in that state of it has to happen right now, if it's not an immediate safety concern, like as long as they're not out drinking and driving right now and wobbling all over the road, like then we just need to take a breath and regroup before we get there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that these conversations are the same no matter how, because couldn't we use these these tips for any
Yes.
conversation that we're having, right? Even if it's like a big thing, like I think I might want to divorce my husband or something. Well, we don't start with like the divorce conversation. We start
Right.
with lots of little
Yeah.
conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of what we're doing to our older parents when we are like, oh, you need to stop driving today, we need to find
Mm-hmm.
you a home right now to go move to, or whatever. Those are big decisions, and some of these people, they've been driving for 60 years, they've been living in the same house maybe for 40 years. That's a lot of change. That's not,
Mm-hmm.
and as we get older, I don't know, at least for me, change takes me a little longer than it
Mm-hmm.
used to take, right? Like in my teenage years, I could take off and go to the beach, but now it's like I got to plan to make sure I have
Yes.
all the things and the
Right.
reservations.
One thing that I sometimes think about, I wonder, Christina, is our parents' generation, the last generation where this driving thing is going to be such a big deal? Because you and I have
Mm,
it's definitely not going to be an issue for our kids.
mhm,
For us, we're like the first generation that has utilized Uber, Lyft, all those things. So that's going to carry us further into our senior years, utilizing those
mhm,
services. So I
mhm.
wonder if another two generations, this driving conversation, it's going to fall to the bottom of issues that families have. Kind of super curious about that. I love studying sociology and going out 30,000 feet and seeing
Yeah.
what it's going to be like in 50
Well, I'm
years.
curious too, because as I get older, I mean, even now I don't like driving. I wish I had a driver, right? So, I mean, as I get older, I may not have that issue so much either, because I'll be like, I don't like driving at night either. You're right. I should get a cab or a Uber or a
Yeah.
Lyft or something, and that would be fine. And you can still get around to wherever you want. It's really just those longer drives that you're really
Yes.
missing. And a lot of older people don't drive far, right? Like they
Correct.
just go around town. So it's really not that big of a deal. If they're going on a bigger trip, they're probably going with someone else. And so that
Exactly.
might make it easier. Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
that is a question. But we'll always have that question of like, when is it time to, I hate to say like shorten, but like when is it time to bring down not their rights, but like to really have these conversations of being like, well, this is a really big house, mom. Like, do you really want to be here forever? You spend all your time taking care of it, and it seems like a lot. And so I love having these small conversations, and we can just further it, right? And in these small conversations, would you suggest sharing some of what we feel as well, like some of our concerns, maybe not at a you have to move right now kind of thing, but mom, I do have some concerns about, how you take care of this, or, that it's those stairs are too much for you, or whatever it is.
Always opportunity to do that for the purpose of creating a connection with them.
Mm,
And I think that I'm the advocate for the parent in that always defer. I mean, I can have and share my fears and my concerns, but what they want always takes precedent. And
mm.
that's
I
where
like
my work
hearing that.
is. Like I mentioned before, with doing my own work, with coming to terms with I don't like their decision, but I'll respect their decision. Now,
Hmm.
if we're in a situation where somebody's got moderate cognitive decline and and somebody is in danger, there's a spouse or something, that's a whole nother conversation. But a parent who is just
Because there could be
digging in their heels,
abuse. Yeah.
yeah, and wanting to stay in their home, even if it means they never see anybody, They don't interact with people. The grass is growing like crazy. I think it's our job to allow them to be that way as long as
Hmm.
possible. I think it's inserting ourselves and inserting, I guess, forcing our will on them, always the last
Mm-hmm.
resort. Like if nothing else,
Mm.
I think it's always the last resort. Because I think you asked, when do you? I think never if possible. But if
Never if
never isn't
possible.
possible, the absolute last possible minute.
Mm.
It's hard.
And I think about that because my grandfather was a little bit abusive to my grandmother, and they were like a real size difference. So
Mhm.
it became a lot. And so she ended up putting him in a home where he was also abusive, but at least there was like orderlies and whatnot to
Mhm.
take care of that. But like if my mother would have gone in and been like, "Oh, this is unacceptable. You need to move in a home," he never would have dug that at all. But
Mhm.
but I guess, yeah, this is so interesting because this is really about allowing somebody else to live, even if it makes you uncomfortable, right? Even if it makes you uncomfortable that they're in their own home alone or
Mhm.
driving. This is really about managing our discomfort around it and recognizing that they are still their own human and can still, make their own choices. Now, what happens when they are in a cognitive decline? Like, what if they're living at home and they're constantly forgetting to turn the stove off, or, something dangerous things are happening? How does that change at all? The
It
way that we
can.
manage that?
It can change things. And I think that the most important thing in that situation is to be certain that you've got all of your legal ducks in a row and that you've
Mm,
got because there's different levels of legalities, like the durable power of attorney for medical decisions, for financial decisions, etc. And this is the gray area that adult children live in for a very long time, and it's very uncomfortable for
mm,
us. You can, I mean, you can force somebody into a secure living environment, but it's just you just want to avoid that at all costs. So in this situation where somebody is becoming forgetful, they're leaving the stove on, I'd probably disconnect the stove. I mean, there's a lot of things that we
mm.
can do to create a safe environment before we
Some
actually have
buffers
to play
instead of
the
just,
yes, yeah,
yeah.
before we have to play the
Oh,
card
so
of I'm forcing you. Um,
so the
and
least amount
fortunately,
of intrusion that we can do.
yes.
I'm sorry.
And there are
Yeah.
organizations, there's companies out there that can help you go in. They can go in and do an assessment in the home and make a
Mm,
recommendation for you of all the things that you can do to create a safe environment. We're very lucky that
okay.
we live in a time in a day and age where we can have Uber Eats deliver food most places. Well, not some real rural places, no, but you can have groceries delivered. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have in
Mhm.
place now that make somebody being alone in their home, even when they've got some mild cognitive impairment, it still makes it possible. Um,
Mm,
even having somebody go out and check on them, once a day,
mm.
or there's a lot of things that we can put in place to, like you said, create bumpers to keep them in the home safely if they
Yeah.
want to be there.
Yeah, and that's a really beautiful way of doing it, right? And then it may come for them that, like, over time, there's so many bumpers that it just would be more comfortable living in another place than being,
Hmm.
at home, which is fine, but again, that
Hmm.
becomes their choice. What a lovely conversation. I don't think I've ever, even when I worked in the retirement homes, like I've never had these types of conversations to really understand. Usually, when by the time they've come to our retirement home or our care home, it was already decided whether or not
Hmm.
they enjoyed it. And you could tell the ones who enjoyed it and the ones who did not.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I mean, even there, I don't know if there's studies on this, but the more that they hated having to move out of their home and going somewhere else, it seems like the shorter their lifespan was anyway, because they were so angry about it. And there was plenty of times where, like, There was one older man who would steal the limo from out front and like drive home, and we'd have to like go find him again because he didn't have his car anymore, or he wanted to
Hmm.
go home to his car, and
Hmm.
so we would always have to go to his house to find him because he would be outside going, why don't my keys fit anymore, you know? And so so allowing them to live with their own dignity, how they
Hmm.
want to, as long as they can, as long as they're being safe-ish, because we're always going to have ideas, right? Just like when we have teenage kids, we're going to have
Yeah.
ideas of what safe is, and they're going to have ideas what safe is, and they
Yep.
rarely do the
Exactly.
two actually meet.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so this has been a really lovely conversation. What I learned about today was to start earlier than you think you do. Start before you think you need to have the conversation right now, so that you can really get to know your parents and hear, what it is that they want. And so that you can really get to know them a little bit. Like, what is it that you like about your life? And what is it that you don't like about how hard, or the hardness of getting old? And what can I help you with, rather than this needs to change right now because I deem it's not safe, which is not the best way to go for somebody
Yeah.
who's had like sovereignty over their own choices for 70, 80 years. It can be really
Exactly.
challenging. So
Yeah.
start these conversations as soon as possible. Lots of questions, lots of listening. And
Yeah.
yeah, what a
I
lovely
would
way to
add,
move forward. And then let control
yes.
go, and realize that that's not really your job.
Yeah. The only thing that you can control is how you show up in the conversation with them. And I
Mm,
would add, please give yourself so much grace and so much,
mm,
just be exquisitely kind to yourself, because this is hard stuff. And
mhm,
you're not going to get it right all the time. And that's okay.
mm.
We just have to be
Yeah,
so kind to
I
ourselves,
love that.
because I think it's in the being kind to ourselves that we have a greater capacity to extend that compassion and kindness to the other humans in our world.
Mm.
And we
And
forget
then we
that.
also take on less guilt about like, I couldn't control that. Well, no, you can't control that, right? Like that's beyond your control. And I love, because it's what I always say to my clients, the only thing that you can control is the way that you show up. That's it. You can't control
Mhm.
how other people are going to behave or other things are going to happen, but you always
Mhm.
can control the way that you show up. And so getting to those conversations early, I know for me would be so much better than getting into that panic spot of like, oh, now we're worried about this
Mhm.
risk, the safety risk or whatever. What a lovely conversation. Thank you, Mary. I know that you
Thank
have
you.
a little gifty gift for us. You want to tell
I
us about
do.
that?
I do. I have a little. It's a little training that I put together that I've done for years, and it's called "How to Feel Better No Matter How Crazy Your Situation Feels." And it's just
Ah,
it's a 20-minute video with a worksheet that you work through, and you come to the video with whatever your situation is. It can involve aging parents, it can involve anything, a teenage daughter, a husband, anything. But I show you how to break it down and get clarity around what's really happening, how you're currently thinking about it, and how you want to think about it moving forward, so that you
mm,
feel at least a
mm,
little bit better about whatever's happening. And that
mm.
yeah, that'll be available on my website.
Yeah, I'll put it
Yeah,
right, the link right below, so you can go clickety
right.
click on that. That sounds really lovely, because we all need, that's a way that we can start pooling our stories out, like what's real
Hmm.
data versus what are we making up around it,
Yeah,
because we've
100%.
seen so many scary stories.
Yes, we're all good
Yeah,
storytellers.
we are excellent storytellers. Often we don't even know we're telling stories. We take it as truth, and
Hmm.
that's where our struggles can often lie. So thank you so
Hmm.
much for being here today, and thank you,
Thank you,
shifters, for
Christina.
tuning in.
Yeah, I so enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
so
lovely
much.
conversation. Hmm. And thank you, shifters, for tuning in too. And I hope that this was helpful, especially if you're having struggles with, I mean, this conversation is really helpful, not just with aging parents, but basically anyone, because it like shows us that we don't really have control over other people, but having these small conversations and trying to understand that other person's point of view first is going to be a lot more helpful than just pushing forward with what we think and what we know and controlling the situation. So lovely. Thank you so much again. And y'all have a great day. Are you tuned in and you're like, I wish I had a group of women that I could have these conversations with so I could hear their real lives, how they're experiencing these challenges, how they're getting to the celebrations, how they're building a journey that is more joyful and confident? Well, I got you. I have created a community called the Modern Midlife Mentorship, where we have a modern perspective over what aging and what we look like aging looks like today. It doesn't have to be sitting in a rocking chair. In fact, there are so many women out there doing so many amazing things, as you can hear with my guests on the podcast. But in this modern midlife mentorship, we're going to bring a community together to rethink about what midlife can be like, really dive deep into the topics that are impacting us, like our health, our emotions, our mental health, our relationships, and that big piece of what do I want next for myself. So if you are interested in being in a community, making more connections with women in midlife, and getting all the tools you need to really move through the challenges and get to those celebrations, then I want you to click the button below for the Modern Midlife Mentorship. Learn more, reach out if you have any questions, and I would love to see you there. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed the episode and that you were able to get something out of it. If that's true, then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, every week this season, I am going to be releasing more. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment. It all really helps us get seen by more women so that we can really revolutionize how we see aging and how we see ourselves while we're aging, so that we can age more joyfully and confidently. I hope you're gentle with your humanness, especially in midlife. Bye.